Welcome, everyone, to another episode of The Middle American. I'm your host, Brian Grosier, and we are continuing our candidate conversation leading into Election Day, which is, it's got to be less than 45 days away at this point. Time is flying by, and I'm sure it is for him as well. I'd like to welcome Frank Pierce, who is running for Congress in the 13th District here in North Carolina, running as a Democrat. Frank, welcome to the pod.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Now, tell the listeners a little bit about yourself. What's your background? Where do you come from?
So I grew up in Southeast Raleigh, right up the street from Ligon Middle School is where I went to middle school, and then I went to Broughton High School. So I've always been, downtown and seeing how things change and everything. I am the oldest of 5 boys. I started working when I was 11 years old to help support my family. I actually reffed 40 soccer games a week for about $210. And that money helped us make ends meet. Doing that while playing 2 sports, still going to school, helping with my brothers. So I grew up in there's poor, and then there's like 10 levels below it, and that's where I started. I'm a blue-collar worker now. I own my own landscaping company. I started it from scratch. When I started the company, I was 28 years old, and I started bartending at night while I started the company, and I would work 7 days a week bartending at night until I got the company up and running to where it is today. And now I landscape. During the pandemic, I did help teach 8th grade English to help out in the school system because they were short on teachers. Enjoyed every minute of it. Not enough money for teachers, so I got out of it. And I know that firsthand because my wife is a teacher. She teaches 2nd grade. I have 3 children. So I know what it's like as a blue-collar worker for everyday Americans when stuff goes up in stores and how it affects us and things we can buy and how we can help our families. So my background gives me a lot of information in going into this election.
What prompted you to start the landscaping business when you were 28?
So I'd been running restaurants since I was actually 17 years old. I'd been a general manager, area director for many restaurants, Andy's Cheesesteaks and Cheeseburgers, which is now Highway 55, Moe's, Cookout. When you're in the restaurant industry, essentially, it's a cutthroat industry because if you are doing great at your job, other companies will come and ask for you. And they'll ask what you're making, and they'll say, we'll give you $10,000 more. You'll go to I would go to my business and say, hey, I was offered 10 grand more. If you match it, I'll stay. And sometimes I'll match it, sometimes I won't, and you'll go. But I essentially got tired of making money for everyone else. Because when you're a restaurant manager, you still work 70, 80, 90 hours a week, depending on how the restaurant's doing and how busy you are. It's just part of the job. I love being in restaurants because you're always doing something, always having something to do, but not being at home, seeing my children, and making money for everyone else. I had a neighbor who he was the money man for a landscape company, and he said, if you want to take over my company, you can. And he sold me this equipment. I didn't have to pay him for a year, and then I made payments on it as I was growing the business. And now I'm able to, when you're a small business owner, people say you get to make your own schedule. You really don't. You still, have to come when, your clients need you. But for the most part now, if I want to take a day off, I'm able to take a day off and spend time with my kids and do things like that, which is very important to me. So that's why I started it.
I'm going to ask you a follow-up on the landscape question in a minute, but I had a question regarding the restaurant business, because I've always said I was a waiter, and I worked as a manager as well for a period of time while I was in right before law school, and then I waited tables all throughout law school. And I've always told people that my experience in the restaurant business really prepared me for being a lawyer in terms of the clientele and dealing with customers. And you get all sorts, you get all sorts of people. You'll get a person that comes in and tips you 30%. You'll get a person that comes in and tips you 2 cents. And, you get one good review or you could get 10 good reviews and 1 bad review, and everybody's going to remember that bad review, right? It's a volatile business in that regard. What did you learn from being in the restaurant business that has helped you on the campaign trail?
When you work in the restaurant industry, you're thrown oddballs any day of the time. You could be short-staffed, you could be overstaffed. Something can come up that's not your fault, that, you know, your customers may blame you for. You rung it in right and they cooked it wrong. But it's just being able to actually just conversate with people and talk to them and have conversations with them. I think somewhere along the way, politicians have forgotten about the people and having conversations with them and sitting down with them. And there's a reason we have two ears and one mouth. A lot of politicians will talk all day about things that they'll do, but they won't listen to what people need to have done. And when you're a waiter, you need to listen to the people, and you can learn and you can make yourself a better waiter, because there's all kinds of things that can happen. And you never know. One thing as a waiter that truly teaches you things is you never know what kind of tip you're going to get. Somebody could look like they have millions of dollars and they leave you 2 cents. And someone could come in and look like they live on the street and they leave you. I had a customer one time, it literally looked like he lived on the street. Left me a $2,000 tip when I worked at Tripp's Restaurant. And come to find out, when I looked at the name on the thing, he was a local businessman who would just go to restaurants just to see if he could get treated with respect with what he was wearing on purpose. And then if they did treat him with respect, he left them a big tip. And if they didn't, then he just left an average tip. So it's just listening to people and being able to work in hostile situations and being able to make things happen in short, fast periods of time when you know that customers are waiting and time is of the essence, you know, where it's your tips and your money. Because as tipped people, I mean, we don't get a check. There's 0 checks. They pay us $2.13 an hour, and then that's all gone to taxes. California is the only state that has changed that. So that's something that we need to look at changing. But that way, it helped me because it taught me to listen and to learn and to grow, because you work with all types of people and you get all types of people in. So it teaches you how to be a better human being for the future.
Now you're 28 years old, you're shifting out of the restaurant business to get into a whole new business of landscaping. What were the biggest obstacles that you faced in terms of getting this landscaping business off the ground? And how has that helped you look at the problems that other small businesses are facing today that you may be able to address in Washington?
So when you're a small business owner, a lot of times you always want to just pick up a client and say, oh, I got you, I'll do it. You know, as landscaping, since I'd run restaurants and since I came from a blue collar family with my dad having a locksmith business, we had more dire needs. So of course he would do stuff for cheaper amounts, but it's knowing that $25 cut costs me more money to do it than it does for me to get the $25. And being able to say no and learning to get out there and know your worth and making sure that you're staying true to it. Because as a small business owner, you're always like, oh, I want this, I need more customers, more customers. It's not always about more customers. It's about, you know, when you're doing quality work, you need to make sure you're being paid for it and you're paid properly. One thing that small business owners need is we don't get the same benefits as an owner as big businesses do. Like, we don't get to write off our gas the same way they do. Like for a private jet, they get to write off all their fuel. We're monitored to how much gas we get to write off. We don't get to, most small businesses, whether it's mom and pop restaurants, landscaping, plumbing, electrical, whatever those businesses are, most of the time we pay better than the big businesses, yet we don't get subsidies for doing so. And so those big businesses like, we'll say Sheetz and Walmart and Target that are paying people $9 an hour, my cheapest employee right now makes $25 an hour. And then that's also based on what he is doing. If he is doing rock jobs, he gets $35 an hour. If he's doing mulch, he gets 30. If he's just mowing and blowing, he gets 25. So it's all about taking care of small businesses, because if everyone noticed when we had the pandemic, when blue collar workers were not in the workforce, how the country shut down. We need blue collar workers out there every single day, and they're the ones that need to be making sure that we are paying them. Small businesses get the same benefits as big business, and big businesses are held accountable for paying people. More than half of Walmart staff is on food subsidies because they do not pay their staff. And those are things that we cannot have happen, especially when they're getting corporate welfare from the federal government. So as a small business owner, we need to make sure small businesses get everything the big businesses do, because we help the economy more. We actually sponsor more teams locally in our local football, baseball, soccer leagues. We're the ones buying the jerseys for the teams, but we don't get the same benefits that big businesses do even though they employ more people, we employ more people that get paid a living wage. And that is something that small businesses have always done in America. They've always taken care of the people. And so we need to make sure they have a seat at the table.
Now, this is one of the issues that is on your website, but I'm going to get to it now since you mentioned it as part of your background. You mentioned that your wife teaches second grade and that you had the luxury of stepping in during COVID and teaching eighth grade. I say luxury because I did the same thing way back when, after I graduated high school. My dad was a public school teacher for 40 years, and I ended up substitute teaching for a semester up in my hometown of Chelsea, and that was quite the experience doing 6th through 8th grade. I don't know if yours was in person or if it was via Zoom, since you were doing it during the pandemic.
It was in person. So it was when Wake County finally came back, we were all in masks, so you had to teach in masks. Masks didn't bother me too much. It's the biggest issue is I learned, like, since I was 18, the year I taught was the poorest year I'd ever been in my life since I was a kid. When I say poor, when I was a child, we would pay our bills every other month. Like on January, we would pay our electric bill, but not our water bill. In February, we pay our water bill and not our electric bill because we never had enough money to pay both bills at once. And then each time we would pay whatever it cost to keep it on. Like if we owed $200, but we had to pay $130 to keep it on, we paid $130. And then the year I taught, I still had my business. I would landscape in the afternoon when I got out of school, but I couldn't pick up more jobs, like more, usually during spring and fall, I have more mulch jobs and more sod jobs and more seedings and stuff. And I couldn't pick them up because I was teaching. And, you know, in North Carolina, the base pay was $35,000 minus taxes. And so when I would make more off the landscaping jobs and I wasn't teaching, it was a tough year for us. Like, I got a lot of gripe from my wife because we were struggling, barely making our mortgage payments and barely making a bill. So learning firsthand how hard it is for teachers. I mean, I knew before, like, it was struggle, but, you know, when you have your job, you don't, even though we're not making great money, we're making enough to pay the bills and still have a little bit extra. When you had no extra because I can't imagine how a home that has two teachers or a single teacher that's by herself makes it, especially in North Carolina, if you live in Wake County, Durham County, Orange County, Mecklenburg County, and then those counties that don't have supplements. In my district, there's multiple counties that don't have a supplement. So a supplement is where the local county gives extra money to teachers. In Wake County, it's almost $10,000. So your first year, if you're making 35, you're actually making 45. Well, Caswell County, they actually just got a $4,000 pay cut because Caswell County as a whole does not have enough for teacher supplements. And pandemic money ran out in July for schools. So every teacher that's teaching in Caswell County got a $4,000 pay cut. So they only make whatever the state pays them. So that's one of the things that when I'm in DC, I want to make it so that we're actually giving living wages to people. I want to work with local municipalities and not have, like right now we have a federal wage of $7.50 an hour. I want to give it more specific to local municipalities and say, we're going to have a living wage. Like Wake County will get to vote on it. The commissioners vote. The living wage for Wake County will be $25 an hour. Now, Caswell County, which is smaller, wouldn't be that high. And the county commissioners there could vote on it and say, hey, it's $16 an hour here. And that way we can have living wages where you work and where you live based on the companies that are there. And you can make a difference by just it not being all the same. And you have local municipalities making those decisions to improve everyone's life.
Beyond pay and funding in the world of education, in terms of your experience being there firsthand, and obviously your wife working in it for a number of years, what are the biggest issues in education itself right now, outside of the pay, outside of the funding and everything else?
We don't have enough. Wow, just lost a blank. Enough. Lord.
I mean, whether it's from the curriculum standpoint or the.
No, I'm trying to think of the name of it. So when we train for jobs, why can't I think of the name of the? Just left me.
Just training for the jobs in terms of the.
Yeah, like landscaping, plumbing. We don't have enough in schools when our parents were younger, they had shops where you could learn auto mechanics. They had
Like vocation, like vocation.
Yes, vocational. I couldn't do the word for a second.
There you go.
We don't have enough vocational anywhere in the country, if you look at it, and especially in North Carolina, we don't have enough vocational learning because there are children who do not do well in classes, and they're not going to go to college, but they could be great mechanics. They could be great plumbers, electricians, landscapers. We need more vocational courses in those classes, in those schools, so that those children can have a chance at a future and a good paying future. On top of that, we need to make sure that we actually start learning from other countries. We don't have to follow everyone's mold or stay on our mold, but we need to learn what works and what doesn't work. We know right now where we are in math. This is about 14th in the world, and we know where we are in English, and we know where we are in science. For us to improve, we need to look at what other countries have done to improve and take their model and make it better to fit us and make it so that our children are learning better and doing things better. We still teach essentially the same way we did for years. Classes in a row, all the chairs in a row, sitting in a row. And essentially back then, they were trying to teach people to work on factory lines. There's no, for the most part, no factory lines anymore. And that's why they taught the way they taught, so that you're in a row, you get used to it. We need to expand our thinking. We need to make sure that we're bringing in people who know how to teach, and we can learn from other countries, because we know right now what we are doing is not working to make us better, and we need to improve on that. And there are ways we can use technology to where we're not overstimulating the kids, but where they learn from it, and also where we have more interaction with the kids. And in Wake County, we're lucky because we have schools that go outside and teach an entire class outside in elementary. We have 2 elementary schools that do that, where the kids learn and they get to be outside and be in the environment and not be locked in a room. Studies have shown that works. These are things that we need to be implementing, not just in North Carolina, but everywhere, so we can make a difference for our children. And it's not just the same old, hey, you got to pass this test. Hey, you got to pass that test. There are children that do not do well in 3-hour testing. We know this, and we know that 3-hour testing does not mean that you're a bad employee or a bad worker or you don't have a future. We have to make sure that we're doing what we need to do to have our teachers succeed, have our students succeed, and make a difference for the future by actually bringing in new stuff and not just keep doing the same thing we've been doing since the 50s, 60s, and 70s, because it's not the same anymore. We need to advance our teaching, and we do that by learning from what other countries have done and has worked and what has failed with us, and putting it together to make a difference for the future.
Now, we've just covered your background fairly extensively. None of it mentioned politics. None of it said that you've been in office or anything like that. And here you are, running not just for city council, but for Congress. So what prompted you to say, I'm going to throw my hat, I've got all these different pots boiling here, but I'm going to throw my hat into running for Congress?
So the person who has the seat now decided not to run, told everyone extremely late, gave us about 20 hours to, if somebody was going to run. I received a bunch of phone calls from people seeing if I would be interested in it, and I was thinking about it. I mean, I grew up in North Carolina. My uncle has a farm. I would work on his farm some during the summer when I wasn't working. But North Carolina has always been my home, and we need people in Congress who are going to be there for everyday workers. You know, the farmers who get up at 4 a.m. to make a difference for us, the teachers that go to work, the moms and dads working 2 and 3 jobs to put food on the table for their children and to make them have a better life. We need someone who understands that. When I was a kid, I wanted to be in politics, and life got in the way between my dad getting sick and college, and I was married before I left college. So when this opportunity popped up, I said, I can reach these people and I can get out to them and talk to them. And we need more people in Congress who are like everyday working people. Both parties, whether they're Democrat, Republican, always seem to put people that have money in power that don't understand just the simple basics of life. Because once you don't have to worry about paying a bill or paying for food, things change. Like you just see life differently. But the struggle for 95% of America right now is they can't buy what they want from the store. They have to miss a bill payment because they don't have the money to pay that bill. They have to pay it in a different month. We need to make sure that we're writing policy for that, and I know I can do that. I've since I was a kid, I loved history and politics and studied it. I know how to write policy. I know how to write it where I don't need some big person from some conglomerate telling me, hey, you need to write this. No, I know how to write it so that we can have policy that makes a difference for people and not corporations. And so when this opened up, I thought about it for a little bit, talked with my wife and talked with some people, and I said, let's go out there and run and be the difference that we know we can be in DC, but we actually get a blue-collar worker, someone who's from America's Engine in office, writing policy for everyday people that can have conversations with and you can have a beer with and just talk to. When I started running, we fundraised for a little while, but our biggest thing that we've been doing is I had a hot dog cart donated to me, and I've been going out to neighborhoods, apartment complexes, Walmarts, Targets, Food Lions, and I just sit there with a hot dog cart. I put up 2 big, huge signs that say free hot dogs, and people just come up to me and say, what's a hot dog? Why is it free? And I was like, just for meeting me, and they laugh. And they're like, why? And I said, well, I'm running for U.S. Congress, and I just want to learn what's important to you and how I can make a difference in your life. Because I think if you look back in time, there was a time when you could just sit down and talk with congressmen and congresswomen, and they made time for you. Now it's always, they'll make time for the rich or other higher up people, but they won't make time for just the person that can't donate to them and just listen. And I want to be the candidate that can just listen. I will have that conversation with you. And so that's why I wanted to run.
Now, that hot dog stand, a very novel idea, and I think that's thinking outside of the box. I like it. I like to think outside the box as well from a marketing standpoint. When you're doing that, where are you covering? Because for the listeners who don't know where District 13 is and how gerrymandered these districts are, what exactly is the district that you're covering?
So since you said one word, I'm going to say 2 things. So first I have Lee County, Harnett County, Johnston County, Franklin, Granville, Person, Caswell, and a little bit of Wake, the northern part of Wake and the southern part of Wake. And then I do the hot dogs because when you send a mailer, you don't know if the person reads it or not. But if I give away hot dogs that cost me about the same as a mailer, I actually get to talk to people.
Yeah.
And, gerrymandering is real and it does happen. But how you gerrymander, especially in North Carolina, they gerrymander based off of who votes. That's how they gerrymander. So in my district alone, 60,000 Democrats did not vote in 2020. 30,000 African Americans did not vote in 2020. 77,428 women across all 3 the Democrats, unaffiliated, and Republicans did not vote in 2020. Out of the people that did vote, they went for Trump at 17 points, but Cooper barely lost it by 4.1. So, but there's a difference between the federal race and the presidential race and other races. And it is gerrymandered, but my whole goal this whole time is to turn out voters who felt disenfranchised, because if we're being honest, like, how many times can we honestly look at the television on a politician and say, I know that guy, I had a conversation with that guy. It doesn't happen that often. Even with me being in politics, like, I've talked with a lot of people that are in Congress and in city council and in county commissions, but I haven't really had a conversation with them. Like, they listen to me for about a minute and then it's like they blow you off because they don't find you important until election time. So my goal has been to turn people out who feel disenfranchised, because we need a better America. And if the only way that happens is if we actually have people at the table who are going to listen and make a difference for those who do feel disenfranchised.
Now, when you're talking with these folks, I'm sure a bunch of issues come up. You have issues spelled out on your website. First and foremost, for people who are interested, where can they find you? Where can they find you on the web in terms of your campaign website? And if you're on social media, where can they find you there?
So my campaign website is www.frankpierceforcongress.com. On my website, it gives you a link to all my social medias. I am on TikTok, Pierce for Congress. I am on Instagram. I am on Facebook. I am on Twitter. All those places you can reach out to me. I respond to people who send me messages on all those platforms. Also, the campaign number, which is 910-621-7323, that comes specifically to me. If I don't answer, leave a message, I will call you back. I'm probably the only candidate that's running for Congress that actually does that. And I do that because I don't want you to talk into some lackey or someone who's on my team. I want you to have a conversation with me so you get to know me and know that I will always be there to listen, no matter what it's for. Even if I'm elected to Congress, I will be there for you, and I will make sure I have time to have conversations with you, because even though I am everyone has around 500,000 people, I want to make everyone feel that you are a part of this campaign and that you have a voice, and I want to make sure that that voice is heard. Because my district is over 200,000 unaffiliated, 170,000 Republicans, and 140,000 Democrats. So my district is very different in what everyone wants, and I want to make sure that I represent everyone, and I'm not here for one party's beliefs or another. I truly believe that if the Democrats have a bad idea, I won't support it. If the Republicans have a good idea, I will support it. We need to be having people in Congress who can have conversations with people from both sides of the aisle, get stuff done, and can we please stop making excuses upon excuses? We need to get things done, because right now the only people suffering are blue-collar workers and everyday Americans.
Well, that's the wheelhouse of this podcast, being the middle American and catering to all those unaffiliated voters. Let's talk about some of those issues. So let's talk about the economy. You've hit on it in various aspects already during this show, but a lot of people are struggling, right? You have people that point to the economy, they look at Wall Street and they say, Wall Street's performing fine. And that's great if you've got a 401k, or that's great if you've got, a number of different investments in there and everything else. But a lot of people don't. A lot of people are living paycheck to paycheck. And regardless of what any politician says from either party, it costs more right now to go to the grocery store. It costs more to pump gas. It costs more to pay for your rent or pay for your mortgage or buy a house. So what can we do? You're running for a national office. You're running for the federal government here in terms of representing the state of North Carolina. What can we do to turn this economy around?
So there's a lot of things we can do. So one, I do also hate how people talk about Wall Street, because 99% of this country doesn't have the money in Wall Street. Now, there are a lot of people that have 401ks, but that's stuff for you when you retire. And a lot of people aren't there yet because they don't have enough money to retire. But so first is, we need, depending on the states, like in North Carolina, people may not know this, the Commissioner of Agriculture can control price gouging. And right now we know Food Lion, Kroger's, Harris Teeter's, they've all admitted to price gouging. Well, the Commissioner of Agriculture in North Carolina can control that. So that also matters to if that person that's elected to that position is doing so. Federally, what we need to be doing is, there is still a tax on lumber coming from Canada. We get a lot of our lumber for our houses from Canada. That tariff tax that they have on it is increasing housing prices because of the lumber. This is something that we need to be changing, because that is one of the reasons the housing prices keep going up, because the cost to make them is higher. So we need to relieve that tariff that is on Canada right now so that we can start building houses at a better price. We also need to be making sure that if companies are price gouging, we need to write policy. Presidents have a little bit of power. We all know that, but the true power of government comes from legislation. We need to be writing legislation that controls price gouging, that controls gas prices from oil companies purposely raising prices on us. We need to make sure that we are holding them accountable for what they are doing. If you all look, as many people will say, like, well, if we do that, this is going to happen. Everything that we can bring forward for policy to make things better for us is already being done in other countries, in Europe, England, France. All these companies that are here operate overseas with those same set of standards. If you go to France and you show up to work at a Burger King, the day you're hired, you get 6 months family medical leave. You get insurance from day one. You get everything from the first day you're hired from a Burger King. And then Burger King here or McDonald's or any of those companies don't do it here because they're not allowed to. And then they'll say to you, well, if we do that, prices will go through the roof. Well, if you look at prices overseas, they don't go through the roof. They're choosing profits over people. And that's something that, if we look back in American history, that is something that we need to go back in time and look, because those corporations used to be taxed more and life was better for the everyday American. If you go back in time, families used to be able to live off of one income. The mother or the father could stay home and with the kids and help raise the kids. Those are things that if we want to make it better for people, then we need to be writing legislation. And that starts with people actually writing bills. And it's not giving up. I do hate it how politicians will write a bill and it won't leave rules or it won't pass and then they're done with it. Write it again. Get somebody on the other side. If you're a Democrat, get a Republican. If you're a Republican, get a Democrat. Get somebody on your side. If you think this bill can be better for your community, then write it again and keep trying. It took the Voter Rights Act of 1965 over 200 tries. Could you imagine if we had stopped on try 2 or try 3 or try 4? If you have bills that need to be passed, keep writing them. We have to stop being 4-year-olds and stopping. Oh, they wouldn't pass it. We tell our children not to give up after the first try, but as adults, they're giving up. We need to make sure that legislation has been written, we're not being lazy, and we're actually in DC doing our jobs and not at home or on vacation, because you can see where a lot of these politicians are. They post it on Instagram and Twitter. They're not in DC writing bills for you. They're in the Cayman Islands or they're somewhere doing a party. We need leaders who are going to write legislation to make better policy for us so that we can have a better America for the future, not just for us, but our kids and our grandkids.
Let me ask you about another issue that's a hot button topic, especially after the most recent debate at the presidential level, and that's immigration, that's border security, kind of lumping both of those in together. You're in a business, I represent a lot of your companies in my legal career, where I do see folks that have visas or that have green cards or that have absolutely no documentation doing landscaping, doing house building, construction. So we have businesses here in North Carolina that benefit from immigrants that are doing that work. But we also have a lot of folks that are skipping the line and that are just coming through the border and seemingly without any consequence. Yes, they get processed to some level, but then they get released into the United States with a court date that's someday in the future that they never have to really go to, and yet then they're here. And that's been happening by the millions and the millions. I mean, there's plenty of stories about immigration and the border at this point. People are pretty familiar with it. So
Yep.
What we can all agree on is something needs to be done. Now, what needs to be done, that's where the people differ. What would your take be on the border in terms of securing it? And then I'll ask you about immigration after that.
So there was a bill on the table that was stopped by President Trump. He didn't want the pass the bill so that they could run on it. But that's not the issue with that bill was it still didn't go far enough in the fact that we know what we need down there. I've talked to Border Patrol. I've talked to people who live in Texas. And one of the things that we need is we need more judges down there. We need more people who speak multiple languages that can translate for us to talk with everyone that's coming down there. We need more people that can help with the issues that we have with children down there. it needs to be some, we are a nation of immigrants, we know that, but it starts with the process in the beginning. We are so short-staffed down there on judges, interpreters, lawyers. We need more people down there so that it helps us control the issue. Because if we are controlling the issue, then we can control who comes in this country and who we send out. And it's not just that, boys. It's not just the points of entry, but it's also holding people accountable, because we do have a lot of people who are here from Europe who are no longer legal. They've outstayed their visas and they've done things like that. But for us to fix the issue, we have to have people in place to do so. We have to have people at the border. We have to have people monitoring the visas. And it's not something that we're just forgetting about. If we really want to control the issue, then we need to set up policies to control those issues so that we can make this the country that we want it to be.
Now, that's talking about people coming here, right, in terms of border security. What about the people that are already here? What about that aspect of immigration? How do we handle the millions and millions of folks that are here and maybe here illegally? What do we do about them?
So that starts from the beginning, because when you start studying the issue, you will be amazed at how many Europeans are here illegally. But that just starts that we need a process, and it can't be just, oh, this is just one department's problem and they're not funded enough to have enough people to check on them. If we want to control the issue, then we have to make sure that there are enough people working to do that job. We have to make sure they have the money to do that job. And we have to make sure that we have communication through our states, because we still don't communicate with each other when it comes to, hey, we arrested somebody illegally that's here, or even if, you know, a husband beat his wife and then he goes to a different state, like it's not on their register that he beat his wife. He could be a danger to people. So these are things that even other things besides immigration that we are not good at as states, because we do not communicate. We have to have better communication in our states. We have to have better communication in the federal government. And that starts with the top. You know, we have to write legislation to make sure that happens. And we have to start holding people accountable for the jobs they are doing or they aren't doing. If they're not doing their job, well, then we need to replace them so that we can actually make this place better for everyone that's here and everyone that wants to come in.
Let's shift to foreign policy. Since you are running for Congress, that's going to be another issue that you're going to have to address. You've talked about funding for school teachers and small businesses, and we're talking about, you know, putting in people on the border, and that's going to cost money as well. And one of the biggest complaints when it comes to this Ukraine-Russia war that's been going on for several years at this point is that we keep sending them money, that we shouldn't be sending them money anymore. They need to either get it from collectively from the UN or handle it themselves, but we shouldn't keep paying U.S. tax dollars for a war that isn't our issue. What should we do with Ukraine? Should we continue federal funding with them? And if so, should there be strings attached to it? And if not, why?
Well, there's always strings attached to all money, no matter where we send money in this world. Even if we're in the war, like if we were bombing a place or doing whatever, like who paid to fix Iran? If Russia gets Ukraine, that is detrimental to the U.S. economy, period. It doesn't just hurt us for wheat, because they are one of the world's #1 wheat producers, but it just hurts us in the amount of power than Russia has. They will become more of a threat to the U.S., which causes more tension, which causes more stress, and it can be a bigger issue for the U.S. So I feel that we need to be doing more to make sure that we are stopping Russia from doing that, because if Russia gets Ukraine, we are going to be worse off, not just for the weak, but they will be more of a power, and Russia and China together can cripple the American economy if they want to try to attack us and come at us in ways that we have to stop.
Now, the other major conflict on foreign policy grounds, at least, is what's going on in Israel, whether you're talking about Hamas, Hezbollah, other terrorist organizations or states that are around, or countries that are around the state or the country of Israel. Let's deal with Hamas in Gaza, because that's the big one. What should the United States continue to do or do differently when it relates to the Gaza-Israeli conflict?
Well, I believe it's the DOD website. On there, it talks about how we believe that the Palestinian people have a right to their land and that they are there and that we will protect them and be there for them. We have yet to do that. Everyone that is from Palestine is not Hamas. Things that have happened over there to kill, 4 Hamas members, and then at the same time we're killing 200 innocent lives. People have to know that that is not what needs to be happening. We do not need to have things happening that should not be happening. Israel should not just be bombing to bomb. Believe me, Hamas is a terrorist organization. We know this, but everyone from Palestine is not Hamas. And we cannot just go there and just bomb and just let them get away with that. You have to have diplomacy, and you have to make sure that there's people sitting at the table, and we hold those who are doing atrocities to the people of Palestine are held accountable. But there needs to be an immediate ceasefire, because there's still really not one. I mean, I know they agreed to one, but there also needs to be an arms embargo so that we can actually get in there and have a conversation and make it so that there is peace, and that we can have people sitting at the table that are from Israel and from Palestine, and we create something that allows us to move forward to where we're not just also funding a war just to fund a war, because that's what we're doing over there.
Let's move domestically. You've got 2 issues, and these are the last 2 I want to talk to you about before we wrap this up. You talk about ending gun violence and reproductive rights. Let's deal with the gun violence first, because in your district, which you listed off a whole bunch of counties, if those of you that are familiar with North Carolina, you probably got a lot of gun owners in those counties. So with that being said, how can we address the gun violence issue in the United States without stepping necessarily on the toes of those that own guns currently and abide by the Second Amendment?
So, I grew up, my father took me hunting, shooting guns, teaching me how to shoot properly, all of that stuff. And I'm grateful that he did that. But ending the gun violence, back in 1992, we did have, that ended in 2002. We had 10 years where we had control on what was sold and how it was sold. And we can bring that back without infringing on anyone's rights. I do believe that registering a gun is no different than registering a car that you have to drive as a vehicle, because you can hurt somebody, have insurance. Requiring insurance on gun owners, I think, would be also something that we can look at doing so that there's protection. There are states that you say that, people, you got to have a license to buy a gun and you have to have this. Well, that may be true, but you can circumvent that. You can buy a gun from an individual owner. Like in North Carolina, I could come buy a gun from you, and then I don't have to have a license to have it. You don't know that. The only you have to be aware of is that I'm a citizen and I'm of age. Well, just looking at somebody, you don't know if they're a citizen, but you can tell people's age. But then if I were to go harm somebody with that gun, there needs to be laws in place that find that if you're going to sell that gun, perfectly fine, but you better know who you're selling to, because those things matter. Like if they have red flag laws and you didn't do a background check because you're an individual gun owner, well, you need to be held accountable. As we saw in Georgia, that father is being held accountable for buying the gun for his son. So we just need policy that's going to allow you to continue to hunt. And I have friends who hunt wild boar, and with a wild boar, you need an AR-15 or a high-powered rifle to kill them from over 400 yards. In North Carolina, wild boar run rabid, and there are farmers who will have you come and kill as many as you want because they eat up their crop. But those high-powered rifles, I am perfectly fine with you hunting with. I just want you to register your guns and make sure that you have safeties in place so that they cannot be used by someone that can cause a problem. And also, if you sell a gun to another person without doing any of the checks, you can be found liable for the same issues that that father was when he was found liable for when his son shot up at the Georgia school. Because you were making a decision to stay on, that is perfectly fine, and you're right. But you should have some responsibility if they commit an action because they couldn't buy the gun from a real store because of the laws prevented them.
Let's move to reproductive rights. Obviously, that's a big deal, especially in your party. The Democrats, the one issue that they poll the best on, it seems to be, is abortion. And right now, thanks to the Supreme Court, that is left up to the individual states. And each state has their own idea on how to handle abortion. I've covered how North Carolina handles abortion and everything in that regard. You're not running, you wouldn't be a legislator that is voting on North Carolina specific legislation as it relates to abortion, but you are representing the state of North Carolina in Congress. So what is your position when it comes to reproductive rights and it comes to abortion? Should it stay with the states? Should there be a national policy when it comes to abortion so that there isn't any discrepancies between the states? What are your thoughts when it comes to that specific issue?
So federally, we can actually do one thing. We can codify Roe v. Wade by writing legislation for it. I would like to be a person who champions to codify Roe v. Wade so that we can make a difference for the future. I personally do not use the A word. I use it, the words I use to describe it, it is women's health care. Plain and simple, at the end of the day, it is between a woman and her doctor. It is women's health care. I believe that the abortion word gets used to scare and terrify people. There are situations that, after Harris talked about a woman bleeding out in the hospital parking lot, and then people said, oh, that didn't happen. And then many women came forward and said it did. At the end of the day, this is health care for a woman, and this is what needs to happen. It needs to be between the woman and her doctor, and it has nothing to do with me. I am a male. I do not get to tell a woman what she should do with her body. I don't want her telling me what to do with my body. If I had a woman the other day said, no, what if legislation came up where that anybody over the age of 13 had to have a vasectomy until they were married? Like, there's not a single guy in the world that would go for that. Not one. So we do not have the right to legislate a woman's body at all. It is her choice between her and her doctor, and that's where it should stay. It's not, you live your life, I will live my life, and those are the things that need to happen between the woman and her doctor, and not me. So that's where I stand on that issue. And then for the, I believe that was it.
In general, probably, other than just abortion.
But just giving women, they should have access to IVF. They should have access to contraceptive. These are things that are just pivotal to women's health. There are some women that take birth control, that take it because it helps regulate their body. There are some that can't take it because it irregulates their body. So these are things that we know to be true, and we continue to try to regulate a situation that we should not be involved in. There was a law written years ago that protected lawmakers if they essentially wrote bills that went against the Constitution. But essentially, a lot of bill makers that are writing laws for abortion are writing them based on their religion, based on their belief with God and what they've read in the Bible. And that is how you feel. And I'm totally fine with how you feel. But we do not need to be making laws based on religion. We are a freedom of religion country. We have many different religions in this country, and those are things that we need to make sure that are not happening. Because if, there was a lawmaker that wrote a law on Sharia law, then people would be up in arms. We need to let women have their rights. We need to make sure that we are doing everything we can to make sure all Americans have the right to vote, the right to choose their life, and to live their life how they want to. And that's something that makes our country great and how we can make a difference for the future.
Now, for those of you that are listening, I want them to know that Frank is actively working. Like, he is in his car today, on the job, doing the podcast in the midst of getting ready to do the work. So I don't want to take you too much longer from your work. I want to give you the opportunity, though, the folks that have been listening to this podcast for the past hour, hearing what you have to say. Maybe they've talked to you at the hot dog stand before, and now they're getting a chance to listen to you more in depth on everything else, and they want to find out more about you. Give them, I'm a lawyer. I always, in my profession, we're given a jury or we're given the judge, and we make a closing argument. We wrap up all of the issues we're raising, and we wrap it up with a concise argument that we want to leave the jury an impression with, or we want to leave the judge an impression with. What is your closing argument? Giving you the floor, what is your closing argument to your constituents or would-be constituents in District 13 in North Carolina as to why they should vote for you on Election Day?
So why you should vote for me? This election is not about me. I truly, if you ever come and see me talk somewhere, I never try to stand at the front of the room. I always walk in the room or I'll sit in a chair with the people and talk with them. I want you to have a country that you can be proud of, one that you can be grateful for, and one that makes a difference in your life. As politicians, our number one service should be constituent services. We should be there when you call to help make your life better, whether it's with paperwork that you're having trouble with the government, or things that are happening that shouldn't be happening, and we make the phone calls to make those things happen. I want to be a leader that shows up for you, that sits down and has a beer with you, that will answer your phone calls, that actually will put policy forward so that you have a better life. I want you to vote for me because I'm going to give you policy so that as a parent, you can come home and spend some more time with your children. You don't have to work 80, 90 hours a week to make ends meet. I want to be the person that makes it so that housing prices go down because we have the right policies in place to do so. We're actually holding people accountable for the work that they do. We actually show up, and one of the big things on my campaign that we will be doing is once a month in all 8 of my counties, we're going to have pop-up tents where we're going to have people there helping with FHA paperwork, helping with paperwork to get money to help take care of your kids. If you make it under a certain amount, there are federal programs that help pay for childcare so that you're not counting pennies at the end of the month. We want to make sure that I can help with any issues that you may be having with the IRS or any other issues. We will have those tents once a month. And I want you to understand that I know and you know that there are 4 or 5 big issues out there. And I'll fight for those issues. But I'm also going to start writing policy from the beginning to get the small issues done. Like Caswell County, 80% of the county doesn't have cell phone service. I'm going to work on that for you to make sure you get cell phone service in your county. Person County has been working for an outdoor pool since 1985. Still doesn't have one. I'm going to get that for you guys. You know, people in Johnson County want to roads to be built better because they're falling apart. I'm going to help you with that with federal grants. I'm going to be the person that's going to show up, write the policy, and be there, and someone who's going to listen. And it's not going to matter how long I'm there. I will make sure you will always have a seat at the table, and I will always be there for you.
Now, for folks that have listened to you, and you've already mentioned it earlier, but maybe they didn't have a pen and paper, maybe they didn't get a chance to catch what you had said. If they want to find out more about you, where can they find you online and on social media?
So on my website is www.frankpierceforcongress.com. All of my social medias are right at the top to click and take you there. I have TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, Threads. Also, my phone number to the campaign is 910-621-7323. And that comes straight to me. If I don't answer, I'll give you a call back. And I do that because I want people to know that it is me you're talking to. I'm not passing you off to someone else because you're not important, because every single constituent in my district matters to me, and I want them to know that from the beginning.
And y'all, just to be clear, it's Pierce is P-I-E, not P-E-A, so don't be confused in that regard. Well, Frank, I appreciate you taking time out of the workday to join me today and talk to listeners about you and your campaign. I wish you the best going forward, but thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much. You have a great day.
Will do. And y'all, this has been another candidate conversation. We've got 3 or 4 others lined up here in the next week or two.